My garage is falling apart. This building is over 80 years old, and it's a little rough around the edges. Over the past year and a half, I've been doing my best to turn this into a proper workshop by adding lights, raising the ceiling, and completely rebuilding the front wall for a wider garage door. But even so, there is still a lot wrong with it, including no insulation. But today, all of that is going to change. Converting this nearly century-old structure into what will essentially be a brand new building entirely on my own was not easy, especially considering that I chose to do all of this work this past summer in Texas. The original plan for this video was just to replace all of the old siding and make it look pretty on the outside, but pulling that off revealed that the bottom plate that holds up the wall was completely rotting away. And it turns out that's pretty much the case for every wall. I severely underestimated how bad this actually was. And there's also kind of the small issue of the garage actually looking like this. When I rebuilt the front wall a year ago, I had to use a bunch of ratchet straps to pull it back into the shape it should be. But the rest of the building is still very much leaning in other directions, not by a lot, but way more than I'm comfortable with leaving. So because this place is rotting away and wonky, I think the only logical solution is to tear down and rebuild every single wall. So that's what I'm gonna do. Fixing the lean should be pretty easy. I upgraded my old ratchet strap to a bigger one so that it's strong enough to... So I upgraded my new ratchet strap to a bigger one so that it's strong enough to pull the entire building into shape. Replacing the framing though isn't so simple. The plan is to add in some temporary 2x4s to hold everything in place, swap out the old wood with new wood, and then pull the temporary 2x4s back off. Basically your classic switcheroo, only this time it's an entire building that will crush me if something goes wrong. So before the new lumber goes in, I need to do a few things first. The anchor bolts that held the original walls in place are either missing the nut that locks everything down, are completely disintegrated to the point where I don't even know how that's possible, or in the case of the wall I just tore down, is one of only one for the entire wall. I have no idea how this place didn't just...
I can explain.
So because of that, I have to epoxy in some brand new anchor bolts, placing them every 5 feet. And while I was here, I also filled in the hairline cracks in the foundation stem wall with an acrylic sealer. That way, water and bugs won't have a direct avenue to the inside.
Get out of here.
And once those are fully cured, I'm good to install the new foam seal along with the new rot-resistant pressure-treated bottom plate.
That's not going anywhere.
From there, I marked out the locations of all the new studs, double-checked that this was in fact level now, and started whacking in some new wood. And after hours of work, I was completely finished with one half of one wall. Good God, I'm already tired. For the next half, I added in even more anchor bolts, but to get the bottom plate running the full length of the foundation, I cut a lap joint into the end to correspond with another one that I'm cutting into the next piece. And once that was sealed up with a specific end grain sealer, I both glued and nailed it into place, effectively making them one very long piece. Now, I don't know if it actually works that way, but it seems right to me. And at this point you might be asking, Ronnie, how do we make sure that the garage doesn't just fall back over when you remove the ratchet straps? And that is a good question, especially considering just how many comments I received about how Americans build their houses out of cardboard, which isn't exactly untrue. Listen, I get it. Seeing my entire garage flex like it did was terrifying, but wood, specifically southern yellow pine, is incredibly strong and capable of bearing immense weight. The only caveat is that it needs to be reinforced through triangulation. But if you want, you can also use a rectangle. Psst, which is really just 2 triangles. When properly nailed in place, these structural OSB sheets will hold the studs exactly where they are, eliminating the possibility of any lateral movement, which is something that the original horizontal boards weren't capable of. Though installing these was easier said than done. Not just because a single sheet weighs 50 pounds and is incredibly awkward to maneuver by yourself, but mainly the heat. In case you weren't aware, it gets extremely hot in Houston, with humidity ranging from dry to miserable most days. Ambient air was already 95 degrees, but the temperature of things actually in direct sunlight was even higher. Not only did my camera almost overheat, but the giant fan that was my only form of solace literally caught on fire and stopped working.
It's very hot out here.
I was dying, and all I was wishing was please let the weather be anything other than...
Tonight, millions of families and businesses are without power as South Texas takes a direct and deadly hit from Hurricane Beryl.
Well, maybe not anything. Hurricanes are usually not super chill, and this one was no exception.
Downtown Houston flooded, cars washed away, and homes crushed.
We did as much preparation as we could,
That'll be okay.
but that didn't stop the flooded areas, homes destroyed, and over 3 million people in the Houston area without power for days. And our street was no exception to the chaos. Luckily, the worst damage our home saw was just a few fallen branches. Water did make its way inside the garage, but everything important was elevated off the ground. Things could have been a lot worse, but still, 3 out of 10, not a good time. Eventually, after a few days, power came back on, water went down, and I got back to work. One of the cool things about working on old buildings are the weird artifacts you find, like wires that go directly into dirt, or giant sprockets tucked away in the soffit, or vintage nails.
Ow!
Inside your big toe.
That really hurts. Oh, god damn it. Yeah, that went through my toe. That went through my toe.
To make it so this massive ridge beam here is properly supported again, I reinstalled this 4x4 post. That way there's a direct load path to transfer the weight of the roof into the foundation. Now to finish up this first wall, I actually had to start on the next wall, where I'm just standing on more boards with nails in them. What the hell is wrong with me? And that was because I had to pop in the next section of the new bottom plate in order to add in that last stud for the last piece of sheathing. Meaning this wall is now fully rebuilt. And there's definitely nothing critically wrong with how I constructed it that I'm just now realizing.
No, it's fine. It's fine. There is, however, a lot wrong with the next wall that is not my fault, and I'll show you.
If you were to take a string from one corner of a wall and pull it tight all the way to the other corner, the string should run perfectly along the top edge. But here, there is about an inch gap in the middle. My first thought was, oh my god, I guess the roof must have sagged at some point and pushed the entire wall out. But then I looked down and realized it was the exact same thing on the bottom plate, which is bolted to the ground. So not only does that mean the back wall actually looks a little closer to this, but it means it was built that way.
And please note that the string is perfectly in line with the edge of the concrete foundation. It's just the sill plate that's completely in the wrong spot. Why?
To find that out, I cut away the bottom plate only to reveal two things. One, there just might have been termites, and two, it looks like the original anchor bolt was hit to the side whenever the foundation was first formed. So I can only imagine the original builder saw this, said, hammered it back upright, and then just built the wall up in entirely the wrong spot.
Jesus Christ, did they just not care?
Fixing this easily avoidable mistake 80 years late shouldn't be too hard though. With this 360-degree laser level lined up with the edge of the foundation, it'll create a line that's exactly where the top section needs to come out too. From there, I cut away the nails holding down the rafters, started tugging on this thing until I was satisfied, and then held it in place with some temporary screws. Now for the bottom plate, I just had to repair the foundation with some new concrete and install the new wood to where it's not hanging over the edge. And now it should just be a matter of throwing on some more studs and calling this a day, but no, that would be too easy. You see, I noticed something else wrong with the wall. With the laser level now placed on top of the open garage door, it perfectly lines up with the wall's top edge. Convenient. Except of course for the back wall that slopes downward over 1.25 inches lower than where it should be. So the wall looks more like that, only because the raised stem wall section of the foundation is sloping down.
At first, I was scared that there were larger foundation settling issues with the whole building sinking into the ground, but nope. It's just that the original builders formed the concrete wrong in the first place.
Granted, 1.25 inch drop over 26 feet is practically nothing, but fixing the roof so that it is actually level was as simple as making each subsequent stud slightly taller than the previous one.
But there's still kind of one big problem remaining, and that is the rafters.
So if this is where the framing should have been originally built, but it was actually constructed here, pulling the wall inward like I did really only solved half the issue. To fix that, I had to cut a new bird's mouth in every rafter a little bit higher up. That way the bottom edge falls right in line with the wall's top edge. And to permanently lock these down, I used these giant screws specifically for securing rafters. Do that 11 more times, throw on some OSB panels, and boom, back wall done. Taking it one step further though, I modified the framing so that I could cut this out, seal the opening, and add in some windows, because any additional natural light is never a bad thing. I'm not a plant.
Oh gosh, dang it.
Now you might think next is rebuilding the very last wall, but it's not. And quite frankly, I'm embarrassed you even thought that.
If this wall goes now, so does the electrical panel that powered the tools I would need to build a new one. So instead, I'm just gonna use this. Not only is this new panel the higher quality Square D brand compared to the cringe General Electric, but it has a lot more spaces for even more circuits. Not that I plan on having a giant air compressor, welder, plasma cutter, laser cutter, CNC mill, lathe, drill press, water jet, electric car charger, and air conditioning, but I want to be able to have all of those things. And I also want a bunch of general use outlets. It might seem like overkill having one every 4 feet, but I have no idea how I want this shop to be laid out long term, so having this many, plus more that'll be on another circuit, makes it so I'll have accessible power no matter what. Now, in order to use these, they need a power source. Right now, there is one 60 amp breaker feeding both our laundry room and garage, but to do this correctly, I need to sever that excess connection and run a dedicated 100 amp circuit directly to the building.
And that required us to upgrade our home's main panel to a much larger one too, so that there's actually room to install the breaker to feed the garage. And also, we had to upgrade to 200 amp service from our energy provider.
That was something we paid professionals to do, but because we were quoted almost $4,000 just to run that garage connection, I instead decided to do it myself. And yeah, that's pretty much how it went. Now, according to the National Electric Code, these wires need to be buried 18 inches below the surface, which is exactly how deep this $100 rental digs. But because there can be things like sewage, water, or gas lines buried, it's typically best to call your local municipality and have them mark out where they are. And I did that, but was given the all clear for where I wanted to dig. But even so, it was still a pain to deal with the very thick clay soil, as well as the massive tree roots. Seriously, these things are huge, especially the ones that look like PVC pipe. They lied to me. Inside the trench will be 100 feet of this 1-gauge aluminum feeder wire.
Oh, my foot.
Inside 100 feet of this PVC conduit. Usually, people glue all of the conduit in place and then force the wires through to the other side, but that can be kind of difficult if there's a lot of bends in the run, and I have a lot of bends in the run, so I had the bright idea to slide each piece over the wires individually, like the world's largest bead bracelet, and then glue them together. Turns out, that was a pretty dumb idea. Not because it was more difficult than doing it the normal way, in fact it was probably about the same, but because doing it the way I did is a violation of the National Electric Code. Oops. But still, I managed to get every piece of conduit connected and the wires shoved where they needed to be. And because these are aluminum wires, I had to use a special antioxidant paste where they connect to the terminals. And once the same thing was done at the main panel, the very last step was installing this guy. The NEC also requires that any structure with a subpanel that's separate from the structure with the main panel to have its own grounded electrode system. And that system is just a very long metal rod very deep in the ground. And with that copper wire connected to it, that is everything about the electrical system completely finished. So the ground bar is bonded back to the grounds at the main panel as per code, but in a sub panel you're not supposed to bond the neutrals to the grounds like you would normally do in a main panel. So this is good to go. And now we can just turn this thing on. No, I'm just kidding. I flipped that breaker.
Still not on fire.
Along with the two in the sub panel, and it is all good. 2 lights means correct wiring. I finally have proper wiring in the garage. That's pretty cool. That's very cool, in fact. Every single one of these are operational, and because the first outlet in the chain is GFCI protected, they are all GFCI protected. That is pretty cool. Hisense, more like buy sense, because I'm getting rid of it, you know? It's time to rebuild that last wall. Now you might be asking, Ronnie, why did it look like you just crushed yourself along with that window AC unit? And also, was that pee on your leg I saw? And those are very good questions, but I have 3 very good answers. 1, yep. 2, that pun was absolutely horrible and death was the only appropriate response. And 3, this window AC unit is no longer needed since I now have this. Mr. Cool's new 4th gen 18,000 BTU mini split heat pump HVAC unit. But we can just call him Steve. Full disclosure, Steve here was sent to me by Mr. Cool himself. He saw my Instagram post and said, damn, that guy looks hot. Let's change that. Now, if you've spent even 30 seconds on the home renovation side of YouTube, then you've probably already heard that Mr. Cool is a true DIY mini split system, since you can install everything yourself without the need for an HVAC technician. And that's true, this thing was very easy to install. By far the most time-consuming part of the entire process was just making the surface for the unit to mount onto. Oh god damn it. This was supposed to be the inside. Nice. And once the wall was insulated and the panels popped in place, primed, sealed, and painted, I just had to use the supplied template to figure out where to drill the massive hole to the outside, as well as where to mount the bracket. Then, with some trim and more trim. The wires and tubes get fed outside, Steve gets popped in place, and that is literally it for the inside. Nice. The thing that makes this a true DIY system are these lines right here, because they're already pre-charged with the refrigerant, where the only things you have to do are thread together the color-coded connectors, open the valves, and hope to God you don't have a leak. Now, if you want Mr. Cool's full warranty, which I've heard is pretty good, there is one caveat to the DIY label, and that is requiring a licensed electrician to do all of the wiring that connects this to the electrical panel, which is definitely what I did. Then, with a little bit of insulation and a few cover panels popped on, that finishes the entire installation. So from there, we are free to flip on the breaker and bask in the ice-cold air. And Steve here is actually capable of heating too, not just cooling, so this will be perfect for the 6 weeks of cold we get here in Houston. This is really an incredible upgrade to the shop, and honestly one that I was going to do regardless of whether or not it was sponsored, but Mr. Cool really helped out here. So if you want one for yourself, go to mrcool.com to check them out. Now, there is one small problem. It's not actually cooling down lower than 85 degrees. Not because the unit is bad or anything, like, it's great, like, seriously, I think you're incredible. But mainly because the rest of the building is very much uninsulated. Even on cool mornings, the sun is very present, heating up the dark panels and creating a temperature difference upward of 25 degrees. Yikes. The only solution is more insulation. But not before framing out this wall for even more windows and running all of the wiring. Now, if you're wondering why there's regular studs above the openings instead of load-bearing headers, well, that's because this is not a load-bearing wall, so those aren't required. Trust me.
I checked online.
And besides just temperature, this mineral wool insulation should also be a great acoustic insulator, which is great because I will be making a lot of noise in here, and also the birds outside can be very mean.
Hey, Marco.
Hey, Paulie.
You see Ronnie earlier?
Yeah, what a jackass.
Now, before I finish up this section here, do you remember earlier in the video when I said there was definitely nothing critically wrong with how I built this wall? Well, I lied. Because the wall is very wobbly. That's pretty spooky, huh? And that is because the main section and the gable section are two separate pieces, which effectively creates the perfect hinge point where they meet, allowing the wall to just wiggle back and forth. Now, 99% of houses have a ceiling in place, making it so that can't happen, but I don't have a ceiling. So what can we do? Well, 5 seconds on Google shows us a wonderful diagram saying to not do exactly what I did. Whoops. But also that I'm not the first person to make this mistake. What I should have done is something called balloon framing, with studs going the full length. That way, there is no hinge point. My first attempt at fixing this was splicing in 2 full-length studs to do at least something to stabilize the wall. Is that actually better?
No.
So as a final effort before I close this wall up for good, I'm gonna do what I probably should have done in the first place and make the post that supports the ridge beam one continuous piece instead of 2. And that took what was a very violent shake and made it into the smallest of wobbles. Which probably only persists due to the nature of 2x4 construction, so this is good. Now you might be asking, hey, shouldn't you have done that same thing on the other side too? Before more insulation goes in here, I thought it'd be a good idea to add in another outlet on the back wall, but for the exterior. Just in case the AC ever has to be serviced, there'll be a spot to plug in some tools. And once everything was added in, this place was finally at a comfortable temperature and staying there.
So, all that's left now is to make this place look good.
It was not long before this was looking like a completely different place. But there's still a lot of garbage. A really great tip for organizing is just to take all of your junk and put it somewhere else. So with those things, a few hours of cleanup, and of course installing these last 2 windows that just arrived, that is this stage of the garage renovation done. Actually, I don't even know if this is still considered a renovation since every single wall was replaced, only the roof is original. The shop of Theseus, maybe? Regardless, getting to this point pretty much entirely on my own has taken an insane amount of effort, money, and of course, time. It's been a while since the last upload, but hey, it took me 3 months just to film this video. And even though I've done so much, there's still a lot more to do later. Because for now, I have a workshop that's insulated, air-conditioned, and structurally sound with a beefy electrical system where I can work on whatever project I want. I am very excited for what's to come. So thank you for watching, and thank you Mr. Cool for helping support this project. I'll see you guys later.